Well, good afternoon or evening, wherever you may be. We are at week 44 of our effort to read the entire chronological Bible in 1 year. This is week from October 29th through Halloween to November 4th. And our reading covers a number of the sections of the New Testament, the gospel accounts. Matthew 13:1 through 18 verse 35, Mark 4 chapter 1 or verse 1 through Mark 9 verse 41, Luke chapter 8 verse 4 through 9 verse 48, and John chapter 6 verse 1 through chapter 8 verse 11. And you may recall that Jesus is now in the area around Capernaum, and I'd like to show you generally where that is. So there is the very north end of the Sea of Galilee. Capernaum is almost at the end of the North Sea, at the north end of the North Sea. So when they go across the lake, they are not going across the fat part of the lake. They're going across like this, way up north, which explains how they can be going back and forth with relative ease. In other words, the first part of our reading seems to be a one-day junket, and it's quite a busy day. So Jesus is teaching in this more remote area. Oh, and I was going to point out one other thing. Notice, I don't know if you can read this on my map, but this area here is the Decapolis, which is the 10 cities, and that will be mentioned in part of one of our readings. So Jesus at this point is apparently teaching on both sides of the Sea of Galilee, or it'd be more realistic to say on both sides of the Jordan River, the Decapolis side and the Galilee side. The Galilee side being the west, the Decapolis side being the east, and all using Capernaum as their base station, as it were, their headquarters. So to begin with, I would like to note that it's at this point that it's mentioned that many of Jesus's teachings are not exactly transparent. They're in parables. And the apostles actually question him about this in Matthew chapter 13, verses 10 through 17, which I would like to read. Our editor titles this little section, Purpose of Parables. The disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "The knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. This is why I speak to them in parables." And now he quotes, "Though seeing, they do not see. Though hearing, they do not hear or understanding. In them is fulfilled the prophecy of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You will be ever seeing, but never perceiving. For this people's heart has become calloused. They hardly hear with their ears, and they have closed their eyes. Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, understand with their hearts, and turn, and I would heal them. Blessed are your eyes, because they see, and your ears, because they hear. For I tell you the truth, many prophets and righteous men long to see what you see, but did not see it, and to hear what you hear, but did not hear it. So this passage is just quoted Isaiah 6, verses 9 and 10. And when an angel who said these words to Isaiah, Isaiah said in verse 11, Lord, how long? And he answered, this is a quote, I'm reading that verse in Isaiah, until the cities are laid waste and without inhabitants. So in other words, Isaiah's prophecy, which it seemed like when we read it, was probably talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and the deportation to Babylon. Here it is actually fulfilled several centuries later. This, combined with the statement, whoever has will be given more, and whoever doesn't have, what they have will be taken, seems to suggest, to me anyway, that our efforts to read God's Word will indeed give greater understanding in times of trouble, and there will be times of trouble. So at any event, at some point, we don't know how much after that conversation this next event occurs, he tells the disciples that they need to cross the Sea of Galilee to the east side, to the Decapolis side. And it seems, as I said earlier, to be simply a one-day excursion. But it certainly is filled with activity. And remember, they're rowing or perhaps sailing. They don't have nice Yamaha outdrives. So en route to the east from the west, from Capernaum, basically, Jesus is sleeping in the boat. A bad storm blows up, and the disciples are frightened. And they awaken Jesus to say, we are all going to die. Don't you care? Of course, immediately, instantly, it appears, Jesus calmed the storm, which seems to have frightened the disciples even more than the storm itself, which I can understand. That would be, whoa, who is this? But we know who this is. We know the whole story, and they're learning. So these events in themselves are a parable, demonstrating that we must have that faith that Jesus will save. So when they arrive at the eastern shore, recall, if you've read it, that they encountered a violent madman. I apologize for that. They encountered a violent madman. You recall that. And when they did, Jesus spoke to the demon. It's not clear he spoke to the violent madman at all. So, in point of fact, he gets rid of the demon, and the demons plead with him, Jesus, to let them go into a herd of pigs. Now, I can tell you that this story was a great puzzle to my father. My father would frequently tell me, what were these Jews doing raising pigs? This is so wrong. For which I obviously had no answer, nor did he. Probably you don't either. I don't know. So the fact is, the pigs, the demons enter the pigs. The pigs commit suicide. Where do the demons go then? I don't know. I have no earthly idea. But Jesus says we're heading back to the west side. And this is what happens as they're getting ready to leave. The man who was relieved of all these demons, the legion of demons, as Jesus, I'm now reading the text, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him go, but said, go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. And one can probably conclude that many more believers were generated by this man's earnest reporting of how he had been saved by Jesus. On the return to the west side, so now we're back very close, or in Capernaum, a leader of the synagogue, and I would submit that this is a leader of the synagogue in Capernaum, pleads with Jesus to heal his daughter. En route to the home, a woman who had been bleeding externally for 12 years simply touches his garment, his robe, and is miraculously healed. And she recognizes she's been healed instantly. At the same time, Jesus recognizes that power has left him, and he says, "Who touched me?" And if you're like me, you're visualizing a Saturday Night Live moment. What? There are 100 people crowding around you. Who touched you? I don't know. But the woman admits that she touched him. This is her voice, or this is what she said. Jesus kept looking around to see who had done it. Then the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came and fell at his feet, and trembling with fear, told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has healed you. Go in peace and be freed from your suffering." This is a stunning statement, and it goes with the next statement we're going to capture. This shows that somehow our faith and belief that Jesus has this power is what allows the power to be active. This is repeated in the very next events, because after that, we have a discussion. Now, these things occur kind of in sequence. So the leader of the synagogue has come forward. This is before the lady touched the robe, but they're on their way to the synagogue leader's home because he has been pleading that Jesus would save his daughter's life. And so they're on their way, and it is noted as they're traveling with this large group of people, I would assert, they're moving along toward the synagogue leader's home, and lo and behold, somebody comes and says, no point, your daughter already died. And of course, Jesus, Jairus' daughter, is the one who's died. But Jesus, Peter, James, and John went to the home, and only those four were physically present in the presence of the girl, and they raised the daughter from the dead. So I'd say that was a pretty full day of teaching and preaching with some pretty powerful effects in the neighborhood. The next thing we learn about, and then Jesus comments on how he's rejected again at Nazareth. This is in, let's see, what is that? Mark 6, chapter 6, verses 5 and 6. Jesus said to them, "Only in his hometown, among his relatives, and in his own house is a prophet without honor." He could not, and that's Jesus' words, and then the text says, he could not do any miracles there except lay his hands on a few sick people and heal them. And he was amazed at their lack of faith. So in other words, the woman who touched his robe had absolute confidence that he could heal her. The people of Nazareth basically said, this guy's the carpenter's son. He's nothing special. He can't do anything. and their faith was so weak that Jesus himself, it says, he could not do miracles there, many miracles there. That's a stunning revelation to me. So that's where we are, and as we read on, we learn about the fact that about this time, so now Jesus is up in north in Capernaum, about this time, Herod has John beheaded. And if you are like me, you're stunned by his willingness to have a human being beheaded because his wife asks him to, because her daughter is a fancy pants or whatever. It's unbelievable to me that he would behead a human being over that. And the reason she hated John is that he frequently, apparently, or at least somewhat vocally, noted that their relationship was basically an adulterous relationship. So, sad story, but that's what happened. Also, at this time in our reading, very near Capernaum, there's the feeding of the 5,000 on a hillside near Capernaum, it appears. 5,000 men, I would note, is what the verse says, the text says. 5,000 men were fed miraculously. And so who knows, probably somewhere between 6,000 and 10,000 people were fed miraculously. And after that event in our reading, Jesus is, again, this time not in the boat, and the winds are blowing strongly against them. And Jesus walks out to the boat on the sea. Peter is frightened. They're all frightened. But Peter says, "Let me come to you." And he walks out on the water. And once again, what happens? As he loses confidence in Jesus' ability to let him walk on the water, he sinks. And only when Jesus touches him and applies upward force does he have the confidence to let the miracle happen where Jesus can let him walk on the water. And they walk back to the boat. And then finally, the last event of the last exciting event of our current reading, Jesus takes Peter, James, and John, the same ones that raised Jairus' daughter, up on a mountain, an unidentified mountain. We don't know exactly where, but I believe it's probably in the vicinity of Capernaum. And there, God speaks to him and them and says, "This is my son in whom I am well pleased." And they also get to meet both Moses and Elijah. So here we have Jesus in the flesh still, at least his flesh is not being, he has not been killed yet, and Moses and Elijah. And I would bring to your attention that those two people, Moses was taken away and died with God in some way. In other words, God disposed of Moses' body. They could never find it. And I believe he was taken up. And we know that Elijah was taken up into heaven in the view of others who saw this happen. So those two people did not die in the normal physical way. So somehow they were able to be present with Jesus on that mountain. And then finally, after that event, Jesus begins explaining to the disciples, to the apostolic disciples, that in fact he is going to have to suffer and to die at the hand of the Jewish leaders. So the ugly truth of the requirement for spotless blood being shed to save the apostles, other disciples, and us from our very own personal sins is beginning to be explained by Jesus to his followers. So with that, we conclude our reading for the week and look forward to another week which we'll join together again. Thank you for being here.